Education is very left-leaning. The vast majority of teachers vote for left-leaning parties, and as you enter academia, up to 90% of academics are left-leaning or vote for left-leaning parties. And we saw very similar results in the EU referendum, where the vast majority of educators were voting to remain in the European Union. This is a clear lack of pluralism in education. And it's a problem because young people are not being exposed to the wider range of views that they will experience in the real world. And it's resulting in the indoctrination of young minds. We saw similar results over Brexit, with the vast majority of teachers and academics voting to remain in the European Union. And I witnessed this firsthand as a school teacher on the ground, who was also campaigning in my free time for Vote Leave. That amazing euphoric day when we voted to leave the European Union, I walked into school ready to teach computer science, and my head teacher and my deputy head teacher pulled me aside on the way in and said, "Calvin, we know your thoughts on Brexit. Whatever you do today, please do not mention Brexit to the kids." And my reaction was, of course, well, I'm here to teach computer science. Why would I mention Brexit? How would it come up? But of course, I will adhere to your rules, not a problem. However, the issue arose as I went around the school throughout the day and noticed that teachers were talking about Brexit. Quite a lot of them were talking about Brexit to each other and to the pupils. They were saying how sad it was, how disheartened they were, how terrible and dire the results were, and how saddened we all should feel because we all support Europeans, as if the vote to leave the European Union was somehow a vote against Europeans, which is of course a nonsense and a misunderstanding of the entire referendum. But what became clear to me was that it wasn't that we were not allowed to talk about Brexit. It was that I was not allowed to talk about Brexit because I was a leaver and they were all remainers. And there was a clear, again, lack of pluralism, that only one view was allowed, only one view was appropriate, and it wasn't mine. When I first entered teaching, there wasn't much critical race theory or gender theory or queer theory. The big battle of the indoctrination that I saw taking place firsthand all the time was political. It was overtly left-wing, anti-centre-right, literally anti-conservative. Did you see any of that in your child's education?
Yes, I did. The very first complaint I made, which was entirely informal and on, I thought, very constructive lines, was to bring up the fact that my daughter had been told to vote Labour by a teacher, that a teacher had also worn a Jeremy Corbyn t-shirt. There was a casual sense that it was okay to bash the Tories. There's a child in the school who, it happens, was part of the Extinction Rebellion group that threw a milkshake at Michael Gove. And there was instant congratulations for that, even though actually at the time I was sort of struggling for my daughter not to attend those protests, which I was worried about her age group going to. So there was, yes, always casual bias. And in fact, there was actually a rap song played which has the line, "Our Prime Minister is a real racist." That was played and sung in the class by all the kids, and nobody really thought anything of that.
There is a big argument to be made that schools are left-leaning because over 70% of teachers are left-leaning, but it seems to me that that is permeating into the classroom. To be wearing a Corbyn t-shirt is overtly breaking the teacher standards. Were there any more examples in issues such as the Middle East and global politics?
Yes, the history curriculum I would describe as failing to be impartial. I think it was biased in some ways that were perhaps quite troubling. For the early years, before you reach GCSE, when actually the exam boards really set what you're going to study, in the earlier years there was a surprising imbalance, I would say, towards niche communist histories. There was a moment where, in the run-up to World War II being described, they discussed Cameroonian communists and referred to them as a key scapegoat of Hitler. So we've got a kind of glorification of that communist movement being anti-colonial as well, and a forgetting for maybe about 2 or 3 weeks before they even referred to Jewish persecution and the Holocaust. So the impression that the children were given was that there was an ideological battle going on between the Nazis and black Cameroonian communists, which I think is a pretty inaccurate view of history. The school, I think, accepted some of that. They did listen and debate and discuss these issues, but they seemed to be unable to stop that bias continually occurring.
I think education has become far more political. I think you're absolutely right. And I think this is a very, very long time in the making. I think the roots of this extend back over many, many years, if not decades. And I think it's a complicated process because, like I say, I think teachers don't see themselves as being political actors. They don't see themselves necessarily as being activists in the classroom, although I think a small minority perhaps do. But I think the bulk of teachers actually see this now as being part of the job. I think there is a lot of confusion, even in what we might call traditional academic subjects. So if you take my own subject, when I was a secondary school teacher, was English, for example. Now, I studied English at university because I just loved reading books as an end in and of itself. I mean, it seems a very naive thing to say now, but as an 18-year-old, I thought, I love literature, I love reading books, this is why I want to do English at university. I think the problem is we've lost that sense, and English teachers themselves have long since abandoned that idea that literature is worthwhile in and of itself. The same could be said for history, for geography, for many, many other subjects. And when you lose that sense that subjects are important in their own terms, you look for another sense of purpose. As to why would you teach children English literature? Why would you teach children history? If it's not as an end in itself, you need another sense of purpose to fill that kind of moral vacuum and educational vacuum that you create at the heart of a curriculum.
And the results of this indoctrination is very clear when you talk to young people. In fact, recent surveys suggest that the vast majority of young people would have voted for Jeremy Corbyn's Labour, which would of course have been a disaster, but the reason behind it doesn't make any sense. When I was in the classroom, I'd often hear kids saying things like, Boris Johnson is a bad man, or Donald Trump is evil. And my thoughts as a teacher is always, you are welcome to have those views, but please back it up. Why is Boris Johnson a bad man? Why is Donald Trump evil? They can never explain it because they're not taught how to think, they're taught what to think. And this is leading them all through education to when they leave school. We're now seeing that the vast majority of young people would still vote for left-leaning parties. And this is why the Labour Party want to bring the voting age down to 16, because they know indoctrination works. They've got a whole cohort, an entire demographic of people ready to vote for them, because they've told them to.
So what role do parents play in this? The options for parents are limited. It used to be that parents could get together with like-minded individuals, whether it's more parents or teachers, and set up a school in an area where they see that one is needed. That is now becoming increasingly difficult because the government only wants multi-academy trusts to be setting up new free schools and academies. If you think that the schooling system isn't working for your child and there isn't a free school available for you, you can't set one up. It's time for us as individuals, as subjects, as citizens of the land, but also parents and carers, to stand up against the government and against the lobbyists that want to infiltrate our education system. The third-party agencies that want to indoctrinate our young people. It's our job to fight back because nobody else is going to. As with critical race theory, many of these ideas gaining traction in our schools have been imported from America.
We often say that when America sneezes, Great Britain catches a cold, and that is the case in this instance with critical race theory, gender theory, queer theory, all of these toxic ideas coming over from the States where they are rife. However, they also have lots of good solutions. Donald Trump implemented a fantastic executive order that outlawed stereotyping by race, gender, and sexuality. Surely a good thing. But as soon as the Democrats got into office, they tore it up. Donald Trump also said to these virtue signaling universities who claim to be institutionally racist that if you're racist, we're no longer going to fund you. You're no longer going to receive government or taxpayers' money because we're not going to fund racist organizations. And it was amazing how quickly these universities turned around and changed their stories. We could do similar things here, but there is a prime example of this American disease jumping the pond to Great Britain when we look at the American school in London. Parents pay 40 grand per year to this private school expecting a top-notch education for their kids. And these same parents were dismayed to find that their children were being racially segregated in after-school clubs under the guise of racial justice. Of course it's backwards thinking, it doesn't make sense, but this was down to an activist head teacher who has since been removed by the governors. Ofsted stepped in and said in their report that the school was spending more time on identity politics than they were on teaching geography. And this is the fundamental problem. Education really is a zero-sum game. We only have finite amount of time with kids in school to teach finite amount of subjects, and we have finite amount of resources. We have a clear tightrope to walk. We have to decide, are schools there to educate children to impart knowledge, or are they there to educate children towards a political agenda to change the world in your own image? So what can be done? How can we solve this sticky situation? Well, first of all, we can lobby our MPs. We can ask them to support the Transparency Amendment to the Schools Bill. This would require all schools to be transparent with their curriculum, meaning that parents have a right to see what's being taught in the classroom. I think that would make a big difference. But fundamentally, I think we have to stop looking at this as a problem that governments can solve for us and start looking at this as a problem that parents can take back control of. Parents have a lot of power. For example, school governors. In the States, they have school boards where parents can hold schools directly to account. We don't have that, but what we do have is that most schools across the country have 2 slots available on the school governing body for parents. And a lot of schools have a problem finding parents to step up to the mark to become school governors. So that's an easy first step right there. Become a governor at your child's school. Secondly, there's the option of homeschooling. Again, this is big around the world, not so big in the UK just yet, but it's a great idea. If you can afford to take your kids out to school and teach them yourself at home, link up with other parents, create hubs, then your kids still get social time with other children, and you get a wider array of expertise amongst different parents. But there are also lots and lots of resources online that you can purchase, and even some available for free, to help you teach the curriculum if you're not necessarily that comfortable with it. But the main and third biggest option, in my opinion, is the free schooling system. So I used to teach at Toby Young's West London Free School, and I was a governor and director at Catherine Burblesing's Michaela Community School. And these are fantastic schools that were set up in areas that really needed a good school, areas where parents didn't feel comfortable sending their kids to the local community school. Parents and teachers can get together and create a school from scratch based on ideas that they believe in. So the schools that I worked at were set up based on a classical liberal education and the idea that we should promote British values. This is a good thing, and it's a way that parents can again take back control and reverse the long march through the institutions of the state education system. We can get back to teaching what we know to be good, and we can get back to giving children a good and proper British education.